the deposits of the Third Reich. Thousands of hectares, hundreds of secrets.
The task of researcher is to doubt and ask questions.
Nazi riddles. Krzysztof Szpakowski and his guests are looking for the answers in his series. The All Mountains, 200 square kilometers of surface. What is hidden underneath? Where is it exactly? Answers are known by the guardians of the Third Reich, who protect these secrets. Who are they? Right after the end of the Second World War, they were Germans who stayed in this region, then their successors. They still live in these villages nowadays. Their fundamental task? Mislead and intimidate those who are too much interested in secrets several dozen years old. Is that true? Or maybe it's a lie and hypocrisy? Are these legends told by explorers who are drinking coffee, or on the other hand is a dark reality?
Spotkałeś się z tym.
Tak, oczywiste. Proste.
Have you ever met with it?
Nie tylko byli, ale są. Poznałem.
Yes, of course, I have. Not only they were, but they still are. I have met one guardian and I know accounts about such persons.
Polskie obywatelstwo poprzez poślubienie na przykład więźniarki obozu koncentracyjnego.
Most of them were married to Polish female prisoners of concentration camps. They were hiding themselves thanks to Polish surname. They were mainly working somewhere in mines or on the railways.
No, byli to ludzie, którzy dozorowali te miejsca, ukrywali się. Kilku takich strażników.
Some of these guardians were recognized in the 60s by prisoners. I know a situation when a lady wanted to shoot a man who was a trustee in a Nazi concentration camp, and then he has hiding with Polish surname.
Kato w obozie, a potem ukrywał się pod polską tożsamością.
What is interesting is the fact that even when these people die, their successors arrive and they lead exactly the same path as their predecessor. For example, they walk with a dog every day, twice a day with the same road.
Zawsze tą samą trasą.
Do you think they can be dangerous? Yes, I think so, because there are some things which are inconvenient and precious till now. For example, technologies. Remember that Germans were at least for 1 century ahead of the Allies or Americans.
W innych rzeczach technologie alianckie.
What can they guard? The most important things. Gold doesn't rot in the soil. There are hiding places where pieces of art are guarded. These things are really precious, so they are worth being secured.
Składają się na konkretne wartości materialne i pieniężne, nie? Czyli warto tego pilnować.
Pod koniec II wojny światowej Niemcy rozpoczęli wielką akcję.
In the declining years of the Second World War, Germans started to hide works of art, documents, state and private collections, and also valuables. The Soviets were approaching inexorable, and Lower Silesia still seemed to be the safest region. The ideal places for various cubbyholes are Forester of Wałbrzych and the Castle Książ. Old excavations where underground structure of Riese were built made also perfect hiding places.
Wszystko wskazuje na to, że w promieniu, czy tak w takim okręgu 22 km.
Within 22 kilometers radius this area was enclosed. The guard duty was here. People could reach only these pillars. It may suggest that the old castle, so the grounds underneath the old Książ, is a place where works were partially carried out during war in the huge program Riese. The second issue, which is even more important, is the fact that there are signs on trees. You have to look at it really carefully, and you have to know what are you looking for in order to discover it. We are now standing in such place. It's almost invisible. This is kind of a square which is painted on the old tree. The tree has grown, but what's the point?
Rozrosło, ale o co chodzi? To drzewo.
This tree has survived, but there are some which have disappeared. Trees are being cut down constantly. At the same time, the new ones are growing interestingly. Around these cut trunks, new signs have appeared. These are kinds of squares. You can see them here on birches. They are 20 years old. Suddenly, kind of cut stripes around appear. It's not natural. None of animals could cut it or know it so perfectly.
Naturalny, żadne zwierzę by tak idealnie tego nie wycięło i tego nie obgryzło.
So there is someone who continues it all the time, and all the time in the same places. Suddenly on the trees next to those cut trunks, the same signs appear. But now it is really confusing and I don't know the answer. What does it mean? What is guarded here? Is this marking of an area or roads leading to some places? What is interesting, they appear in these places where wars during the Second World War were carried out. The old castle, which was a part of the building of the Project Riese, was destroyed after war. Nothing was found there and anyway it was blown up. I know the account of one witness who has stayed in this area after war. It was July 1945, so the war was over. There were no military activities anymore. As a matter of fact, even one single missile didn't fall down on this land. The truth is that locals found out about the end of war when the Russians entered on the 8th of May 1945. Coming back to the old castle, firstly, let's remind that it wasn't destroyed. It was built in the shape of romantic ruins. It was even open to the public when suddenly in July 1945 the German lady working there had a visit of 3 men wearing Russian uniforms and speaking Russian. It is unknown if they were really from Russia. They told her to get out of there immediately. She was scared because it was well known what Russia did to the German woman there. They told her to take her personal belongings and gave an hour or so to do that. The lady left the castle and she was standing nearby and watching. The castle was bombarded with grenades by the Russians, probably with incendiary grenades because not only the castle was collapsed, but also a huge fire broke out. They went away, she scared ran away, went to the castle Książ and told everything. Later, the person who recounted this story to me also told me that they could see a glow of fire in the old castle in Książ. The old castle was indeed burned and it collapsed. I remind you that there was no weaponry, defensive fortification or bunkers. They arrived with a precise purpose.
Na fundamentach starej twierdzy Świebodzin, to jest XI wiek, gdzie na pewno były podziemia średniowieczne.
Or maybe below the castle. Maybe below the castle. It is built on the foundation of old fortress Świebodzin. It's 11th century. The time when, for sure, there were medieval vaults and maybe during the Second World War they were used. It's probably the period of before the Second World War. The group of German saboteurs was here. They were trained to take actions at the back of the enemy lines. They were camouflaged to such extent that when our common friend Tadeusz Szławikowski was talking to one of these people, he heard that they didn't even know where they were. The saboteurs were trained here but had no idea of their location. Later, they found out that they were close to the Castle Książ. Until when the Guardians were active? Surely they were active in 45 and 46. I know the accounts of people. For example, I was talking with a man who came here from Gdańsk, an elderly man. He knew that I'm a guide here. After sightseeing, he asked me aside and told, "You know, I was here in 1945. Our mom took us here. I came with my older brother. We got a flat in an annex to the castle, here in Książ." He told me a story. Once they woke up in the morning and they saw red crosses painted on a flat's door. It isn't known if it was a blood or paint. On the castle tower they saw a human body. It was hanging. Someone was murdered. As he told, his mother got scared and took them away. They went to the seaside to Gdańsk where they stayed. Someone was trying to chase them out. Someone was very active, presumably those who had lived there before war. Of course, Germans were flushing settlers out from here. There were no military activities in this area, so it was an ideal area for some hiding places where Guardians could stay. Such signs on trees could lead to these places. Have you recently, let's say in the 21st century, met someone who has aroused your suspicion? Someone who has been more curious than the others? When we guide German groups, especially the elders, I can see that most of them listen about the Second World War with understanding. However, sometimes I can see among people older men with a sneer. They look into my eyes, not their heads, but they smile mockingly. Of course, when I ask them, they say, no, everything is alright, but I recognize these people intuitively. I feel they know something. They know something and that is why they laugh at what we are saying. Probably these are descendants of war survivors. It has handed down from generation to generation. They come here, but there are also a lot of people who have stayed here after war and they still are alive. There is still a lot to be discovered.
Niekiedy z nami rozmawiają, tu jeszcze wiele ciekawych rzeczy może być odkrytych.
Twoim zdaniem strażnicy są?
What is your opinion? Do the guardians exist? Yes, they do. But you have to understand that they are not people in uniforms with rifles. They know a lot, they look the same way as we do, and they are married into Polish families. They have been still guarding here and at the same time causing misinformation. When we discover something new, then it quickly turns out to be a blind alley. This is a suggestion that you shouldn't look for anything here. It's misinformation and intentional action. I got the same feeling, the same observation. There are some people who are really interested in these topics and they always arrive when something is happening. They are always trying to cause misinformation and they say there was absolutely nothing here and this was a coincidence. Obviously, from time to time they point us something, for example a drift, but then it turns out and it measures only 20 meters and it finishes with a wall.
Oczywiście, nawet niekiedy coś nam wskażą taką ślepą, jakąś tam sztolnię, nagle się okazuje, że ma raptem 20 metrów, kończy się przodkiem.
An essential thing is a system of signs. A forest and trees play an ideal role. Mutilated trees are for sure the effect of a work of forester, so what do these signs mean?
Mamy oznakowania w lesie, na drzewach istniejących jeszcze i co ciekawe.
We've got signs on still existing trees, and interestingly, there were situations when the forest was entirely cut, but some beeches trees with signs were left. There are various signs mean, for example, hiding places, dangerous places, and places with hints where to go in order to find something or to get somewhere. There are places with point-out events. These signs merely suggest the precise hiding place, for example an entrance. That is how it works. There are also such places which are really numerous in our area, the places that I found and I know where they are. Have you any doubts if these are some signs, if they have any sense? We can also observe some special signs, some additional trees which shouldn't grow in the forest. These are cherry trees. If there is only one cherry tree in the forest, it can be a coincidence. But if we find a place with 4 cherry trees growing on the square plan, then we can't talk about coincidence. They couldn't plant themselves like that. I've got more tidbits. While walking the forest, you can find house and garden plants of various kinds, for example, mallows or lilies which grow in the middle of the forest. There were no households before, and these flowers grow in such places where potentially something could be hidden. These are that kind of signs showing something for someone who knows what to look for. Foresters don't mark trees like that. They don't tear bark off. They have their own system. Some dots or numbers are done on trees which are, for example, allotted to be cut. It's something completely different, and that is why it's puzzling. We can say that these are young 20 years old birches and it's over 70 years after war. But if we watch carefully, we can notice trunks of cut trees next to it. So it is a repeated sign on the tree nearby. It's really strange. What does it lead to? Maybe this area is marked in order to find an approach to some place.
Być może oznaczony teren. Ja tak sądzę, że to nie są drogi dojścia do czegoś, to jest oznaczony teren.
Disclosure of guardians' identity where often people who live nearby may be really dangerous. The deceased Adolf Hirzig found it out. After war, he became a prominent worker of a coal basin in Wałbrzych. He had an access to many secrets. During the conversation with explorers from Lower Silesia, he told about being intimidated by security service and how they were trying to influence the decision of the mayor. He also talked about the role of the guardians of Nazi secrets.
Oni mi mówił, Dolik, zostaw góry są. Widzieli.
The quotation of Adolf Hirzig, and they tell me, Adolf, leave the old mountains. They knew I'm interested in. They were also observing it. We know that you are interested in something else than you should be. Mr. Mayor, please leave Osówka, because I will poison a water intake of the city Głuszyce. You will be held responsible for that, because I have informed you and I have sent a letter to press. It's a blackmail.
I teraz ten burmistrz by został tą władzę zastruszył, ten burmistrz.
Could there be any mine traps in these chutes? Of course, Germans were very clever in mining. I knew where mines are located, but the biggest mine were people. The people who were guarding it and who wanted to get to it. I was observing everyone and I always had a conclusion that they wanted something. They know about something, but they don't have enough power and resources. It's once. They don't have any legal help. Everything was blocked by the mining office.
Nie mają umocowań prawnych, bo to wszystko muszą górnicy.
Strażnikami po wojnie zostawali tak cywile, jak i byli żołnierze nazistowskiej armii. Takie jak 70 lat temu, tak...
After war, both civilians and former soldiers of Nazi army were becoming the guardians. Similarly, 70 years ago, and nowadays their role is to mislead. They have stayed here in order to mislead, to drive explorers into blind alley. Focus on this topic because it's important, and suddenly it turns out it's in a lie. An inversion appears. If you invest money 3 or 4 times in something and you still find nothing, can be frustrating. Then you will say, there is nothing indeed. There are some people who have stayed here after war. They have kind of illegal documents.
Była bardzo prosta zasada. Tuż przed wkroczeniem tutaj Rosjan takiego człowieka umieszczało się w obozie koncentracyjnym.
It was a really easy rule. Just before entering of Russian army, such a person was put in a concentration camp, and when Russians arrived, they called it, so to say, a good German. The one who had been in a concentration camp and stayed here. They were then married into Polish families. Now it's the third generation. I have got documents and photographs of one German. There is his whole war route. He liked taking pictures of himself. From these materials found in the Arctic, it's result that after war the same person had Polish surname.
I tak dalej. I później ten sam człowiek, ze zdjęć to wynika i z dokumentów, ma już inne nazwisko.
Z ustaleń Krzysztofa Szpakowskiego wynika, że człowiek...
Findings of Krzysztof Szpakowski suggest that the person living in one of the villages in the All Mountains had 2 identities, German and Polish.
Jako szanowany obywatel polski, a drugie, co wynika z tych dokumentów, jako przykładny Niemiec.
His one identity was a respect Polish citizen, and the second one, according to his documents, was an exemplary German who had fought his way through the front line.
Rzeczy. Ciekawostką są na pewno kartki żywnościowe, na pewno plaster.
There are more and more private things of this man, for example medals, ration card, sticking plasters or orders. For me, the biggest curiosity, apart from documents, are photos which are a documentary of his whole past. For sure, he was a native German. People who gave me documents told me that he was a respected Pole, married to a Polish girl and absolutely not suspected of such a past. It is a documentary of his whole previous life, his frontline past. These are pictures from celebrations, parties and banquets with his friends from the army.
Zdjęcia z jakichś uroczystości, jak również z zabaw, gdzie siedzą na jakichś bankietach, gdzie są z kolegami z wojska zdjęcia. To jest typowe...
It's a typical spy machine and it works. You may wonder why did he need such a machine? Not everyone has an access to such equipment. What did he stay in Poland? Why did he change his surname? Why did he change all of his dates? It's possible that there were more objects. I'm mentioning only those which I've got. Maybe there was also some weapon. What did these people do after war? Most of the time they were working as experts, for example in mines. That kind of people were needed after war. We can say that he was a typical guardian, who was supposed to suppress something, submit reports and guard an economic area, so the area where something was lodged, hidden. Who is afraid of the All Mountains? It's possible that not treasures are the most important. Probably the guardians and their successors secure something much more significant. Just before entering of the front line, Germans has mass fragments of the underground, which were built here and sacrificed thousands of human beings. The building got the name Riese, in English the giant. These undergrounds are now one of the biggest riddles in Lower Silesia. However, everyone agrees that there was supposed to be the armaments production. People also say about marvelous Hitler's weapon Wunderwaffe. The aim of building the giant was to create a center of conducting nuclear attack. In case of retaliatory action of the Allies, it was supposed to serve as a shelter. However, this crazy project hasn't been finished. Witnesses' accounts suggest that various structures were used to lodge documents, equipment and deposit of the Third Reich. There are sources about transport entering different areas of the giant at the end of war. One of the stories tells us about a convoy of lorries from Reich Bank, which passed through part of Valim and oriented towards surroundings of mountain range Wlodarz. A similar story is told about the surrounding of Sokolec and Ludwikowice Kłodzkie. Until late 50s in Molke, the Soviets were trying to reach underground levels of a secret factory Nobel Dynamite and its connection with the whole Project Riese.